All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Who's in?
How do you use it?
Oh,
The balance.
Yes, the card you mail is fine.
okay.
You do all your voting, the card comes out.
Oh.
You put it in that
This is
machine.
actually vote.
Notice
Vote on
that
this.
it's smooth,
Yeah, alright, got it.
air, you know, it,
We thought this was a counter.
No.
No, they have the same ballots, right? You can do them the old way, just.
yes.
I know this is.
They both sample the machine.
This is just a sample, this is what
No, actually, if you don't want to color in the things, that's what that's for, right?
It was before we.
How do you- how do you-
If you have the
Okay,
patience
all
to
right,
Joe,
right back.
do that. If you want to do it pretty quickly, you use an ordinary
You
ballot.
mean, you mean if I want to learn a new thing or do it the old way, that's gonna work for me
Now,
forever?
if you want the real patience of Joe, do it by audio. 45.
In better spirits. So I'm thinking she's.
Court of Common Pleas, Judge, press 1.
According to this, I can't control the place. Everything's total.
25 seconds.
No, is it?
Either that or it's 25 seconds.
That's-
Again, 30 seconds. Is that collect center?
Yeah, I don't think all the way. Okay, is everybody ready? Pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first order of business is to approve the minutes from October 21st.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from October 21, 2019 as submitted.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next will be the manager's report.
Thank you very much. Okay, the Phoenixville Regional Planning Committee, as you know, the comprehensive plan is in final form. They recently had met and reviewed the progress on West Pikeland Township and being incorporated into the comp plan and the committee itself. The grant application has been filed with Chester County for the Vision Partnership Grant, which would allow for some funding to help facilitate that project. We had two great events. The Sustainability Committee had their Sustainability Fair Saturday, October 19th at the West Vincent Township Elementary School. I thought it was very well attended. It was a nice day for the event, so great job to everybody involved. Also, thank you to Belle Holderness and the entire Parks and Rec Commission and the volunteers for putting together the Fall Festival also on Saturday, October 26th at the Brink Coed Township Park. Let's see here, we have some closures coming up. We have tomorrow, Election Day. The township office is going to be closed for that as well. Can't believe it, but later this month, Thanksgiving, the holidays right around the corner. We'll have Thursday, November 28th and Friday, November 29th. The township offices are closed then. The township's fall newsletter, Connections, was distributed and is available on our website. Richard Grubb and Associates, they completed the historic documentation of the Bryn Coed Farm Complex buildings. It is a very in-depth and comprehensive analysis. I am still reading through it, but it is now available. We did post it on the website. It's very interesting. Just a few things to note. This is an architectural and physical inventory of the buildings located at 1422 St. Matthews Road. And the buildings were built with the documentation we have in 1968. Carl Eisenhower and Richard Hunter were the registered architects that were in charge of this project. They did a state-of-the-art dairy production facility at that time, and they've done a tremendous job, this consultant, with having lots of photos and history, so it's very interesting. Department reports. In building and zoning, we have 32 permit applications processed in October. In the finance department, our year-to-date actual September reports are complete. The draft budget has been presented to the board, and we'll discuss that this evening. In the public works department, in addition to regular road maintenance, we've had several driveway tie-ins and shoulder work to do with all the extensive paving we've had done for South Beaver Hill, Art School, and Pemberton roads. Also, you may have noticed we have a few additional parking spaces out here at the township building, and we'll be looking to pave, hopefully, if the weather is cooperating. We have good bids, quotes rather, come in for that project this year. We're also looking to schedule a pre-construction meeting with Reclaim to establish a timeline for the Bryn Coed demolition project. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, next was the treasurer's report. No, bills list, I'm sorry.
I make a motion to approve the bills list dated November 4, 2019, in the amount of $109,757.61.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
And next we have the treasurer's report.
Thank you very much. Presented for you is a treasurer's report for September 30th, 2019 for this year. We have in front of you the presentation of the September 2019 versus September 2018 information, as well as the year-to-date information comparing 2019 to 2018. A couple of things to note, the taxes are all performing fine. The building permits have increased a bit. I reported that last month, and Renew is actually looking to rebuild the apartment building from the fire this past year, as well as Weatherstone, so that's really advancing. Additionally, if we look here at the expenses right now are in line for the budget, but a couple things, Fellowship Trail and Bryn Coed, we had $325,000 budgeted for site amenities and for the actual trail construction, which we know right now that's going to be carried forward to 2020. So if we look at the second page, we have our fund, or the second page is our description of the new account grouping. The third page has our month-end fund balance summary. You'll note that we have $11,757,227.74. Each fund is categorized here. And with our budget to actual summary by fund on the following page, you'll just note the net income and the position at this point for the general fund at the top, as well as the capital fund, the open space fund, liquid fuels, which we're going to be paying some invoices now with Bird Construction getting done now, and then the sewer fund. Also to note, I know the Township Treasurer is working through the chart of accounts and has some notations on the capital fund and the open space fund as we are trying to put forward the position as far as net income and that sort of thing. So please feel free to take a look. And if you have any questions, let us know.
Thank you, Erica.
Right.
Brian?
First, I don't expect you to know this. New building permits, I'm going to say, are one-shot incomes. Alteration varies to some of the other permits, I'm going to say, recur probably at the same rate year after year. Could you give us some breakdowns in a future meeting where what proportion of our income is, I'm going to say, recurring, as opposed to the one-shots for the new building, et cetera?
Sure. We look at trending on what, and this is also variable with the economy, because people decide in terms of making improvements to their house, alterations, all those things. So you look at your 5-year, 10-year trends on those items, and then you have some of the bigger building improvements, but that's when you know you have this active subdivision, you anticipate land development, so it's an interesting process. You really have to look at all that information and project that out.
I understand that.
So,
I'm kind of looking at asking it on a percentage basis what is, I'm gonna say, recurring in the way of EIT, whatever. And I'm not thinking, I'm gonna go and say alteration type permits, and then the subdivision permits are like a one-shot.
Okay, I think you mean perhaps residential side of the building permit process versus,
New construction.
Yeah.
It's new construction.
Well, that's what I'm saying, it's new construction is a one-shot,
right,
as opposed to alterations
Right.
where they just, they come when they come,
Yeah,
economy
right.
driven, as you mentioned.
sure,
I'm just looking, what is the proportions
okay,
between them?
sure,
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Brian. John?
The financial information was posted noon or this afternoon sometime, which is really late, particularly when we had this meeting. I think it was the latest that's ever been posted. And since the September 30 numbers were put into connection 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I think the numbers were available. I mean, I don't know what they were being held up for, but most of the numbers are the same. I think there's some errors. The connections don't match these numbers in all cases.
That is
In
correct.
enough cases to indicate that a lot of it was closed,
Yeah,
so there's a mistake in there. And, but there was a mistake last time when, again, it was published that you made $72,000 last year and you lost 560. And
Well, no, John, come on. You've sat with the accountant, you were here when the auditors came and explained that. If you look at our financial statement, the net income was $4,072,000. It hit budget almost to the dollar. The $500,000 loss from the audit report and the DCED report was based on taking money from the general fund and creating other capital funds, which pulls it out of the general fund, which caused that to happen. And that's exactly, just like the audit report says we had $10 million worth of expenses. Well, we didn't. We know that. But that's what the audit report says because of the way you have to do the audit report for the state. And that was all explained. So, no, we didn't have a $500,000 loss.
in the general fund, when the auditor
Well, yes,
was here,
it's-
I said, is there any way that you could say there was a $72,000 profit in the general fund? He said, no. That's all he said, no.
Right, well,
He
when you
answered that
take,
question.
you're right, when you
And
take 500,000 out, you're right.
I think if you want to say generally, we came out ahead because we sold a sewer plant, I think you've got to say that.
No, no.
But you can't.
Okay, John, look, if you look at our financial statements, we had a $4,072,000 net income on our financial statements, right? We sold the sewer system for $4 million. And out of the $4 million, you had expenses for commission, legal, and engineering. So your net probably on the sewer would probably be about 3.8. So we actually did have a profit.
Okay.
Technically, I mean, actually, you just always have, I mean, it's really simple. Just look at the
I
balance, how the balance changes from
Cash
year to
basis
year.
means balance.
Yeah, and cash basis is that. But because of the way that you have to take money out of the general fund, which will be an expense, so you pull $500,000 out of general, a bank account, and put it into a new account, like
It was
capital
transferred, not
transfer.
spent.
Well, it's not spent, but it does create an expense because you took it out.
Yeah.
But it's not real.
So it'd
It's
be
just a
nice
transfer.
if, instead of a bills list where we talk about $300 expenditures, you could say, well, we're gonna have a $560,000 expense.
Yes.
It never comes up in a meeting.
Well, isn't that
But
the meeting?
it wasn't an expense, it was a transfer. But yes, I understand, I agree with you.
It-
And actually, I think Michelle has taken care of that with the new format of the chart of accounts, because now it's going to match DCED, so everything should line up nicely.
Well, a lot better, it depends on their mapping.
Yeah.
It depends.
So actually, she's done a lot of work on correcting those type of issues that don't make sense. You know, ours versus theirs.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting sub-comments in here, which I'm sure nobody's seen. And they're almost unreadable. Again, it goes back, they're in red. And so, some kind of grayscale, they're hardly intelligible, and they're hardly visible. So,
Okay, so you want the notes to be bigger and in black. that correct?
Like,
Do you want the notes to be in black and bigger font?
yeah.
Yeah, it
We
makes-
talked to that when they used to be in blue, and we changed that,
Right.
all that.
And there's actually room here, we could change that, I don't see a problem with that.
Oh, they're red on the report.
Right.
And then they-
Yeah, and I printed I have a black and white printer.
Yeah.
Right, right.
I
Okay.
can't make it, I've tried everything to blow up the font to make it bigger. When we can only put PDF. We can only put PDF on the website. That's the problem. If I could do it in Excel, that would be a different issue. But when we convert it to PDF, doesn't matter what size that font is, shrink it down on one page instead of splitting it over two. It makes it so tiny. It drives me nuts too. I have to, blow it up.
Is there any way we can put the Excel up too? I mean, is there?
I was told there wasn't with the website type we have right now.
It's just a file.
Yeah, we could probably do it, but.
You shouldn't.
But we should be able to,
If you use Excel, then it can be altered and you should.
There's a way to lock
you can
it.
lock it. We already, because I looked into that too. I would rather put Excel on there.
Yeah, PDF is better for that purpose, because you can't modify it after it's published.
If
Right,
you lock
and
the Excel, I
that's
don't think
something
you
that I
modify
need
it
to
either.
bring up with the website guy.
Way to do it, you're right.
One of the problems, when I printed it 120%, because if you go to 130, you lose it. It doesn't print page 2. For some reason, my printer just says.
Just goes off the edge.
It goes off the edge.
Right. but
And
it-
so, one other thought I had, we have a lot of columns in there. This percentage, both in the month and in the year to date, I don't know whether they're very useful. I mean, we have numbers that say 400%.
Right, right.
And it's $12.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
dollars
So what
are
would
more
you
important.
I
rather
would, I'd
have?
take that out and put the dollars, leave the dollars.
Okay.
See, because when I look at it, if it's over $10,000 or $100,000, you go back and read the caption of what line it is. But if it says 190%, which some of them do.
Well, I think the
it could be
reason for that
$3.
was to see how close you are to the budget in percentages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to make it easy, so you don't have to do the numbers and compare it to the budget and try to figure out what percentage you're at.
And you care for the big numbers about that, right? You see a big number, then you want to say,
Yes.
what percent was that?
But a big percent means it's probably a small number.
Well,
I
A
know,
big
but
percent means you probably don't want to look at it.
I know, but how are you going to filter some of them and not the others?
Well, leave the percentage
I can.
off.
Yeah, I can do that.
well, you
Somebody
can,
else
but
might.
how much of a space does that, will that be enough to print?
That'd be 2 columns, and it may, yes, it may,
Maybe enough?
bigger print.
How would you feel if instead of on each main account, if it's condensed and you just have a number for that, and if you have any questions, you ask for specifics. That would really shorten it.
Or you could do a summary page.
Yeah, the detail is helpful.
In case you want to.
And I must say that this month is a lot better than last month. I'll give you that. Last month, when they were all staggered and everything, it's a much better
Well, that's
format.
because the one that you saw last month is directly from QuickBooks. This one is exported to Excel and then changed over to a PDF.
Okay, well, it is more readable this month.
I agree. Thank you.
That's an improvement.
All right, thanks, John. Where are we? Treasury. Okay. We have a donation to the Environmental Advisory Council. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sure. The Earth Society uses the meeting room from time to time and provided a $200 donation towards the continuance of our native pollinator areas. And Vic Lawback for the EAC has been working, actually it's a good segue into the return on environment work with a presentation next year in regards to the native backyard habitat work that they did. They did a workshop actually this past year, so that'll be used towards that program.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have a presentation on the return on environment study.
I'd like to introduce J.D. Ortiz, John Rogers from the Audubon Society, and the Keystone Conservation Group. They have worked over the last year now, maybe a little less than that? Okay, on a return on environment study for West Vincent Township. I will allow the experts to talk about really what that means, what the study is, and how that works. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Erica. Again, I'm Jeannie Ortiz. I'm with Audubon, Pennsylvania, with my colleague John Rogers from Keystone Conservation Trust. And we are going to present the results of a return on environment study. John will explain what that is. This study comes at no cost to the township. It was funded by the William Penn Foundation as part of the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. The William Penn Foundation has created 8 clusters of partners in the basin, and West Vincent Township is in what's called the Schuylkill Highlands Cluster. And the partners in this cluster are the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, the Green Valleys Watershed Association, and I know Vicki, she wanted to be here tonight, but she has a meeting conflict. The French and Pickering Creeks Conservation Trust, Natural Lands, Berks Nature, of course, and Audubon. So we are briefly going to present to you the results of our return on environment study. I also want to introduce Beth Brown from Audubon. She's the director of our Delaware River Watershed Program. I also want to mention, as part of a regional plan, West Pikeland also has an ROE that we just presented. So if you want to think about this in terms of a region, that would make sense too. And I think that's it. I'm going to turn it over to you, John. And this will be brief, so. Thank you for giving us time on the agenda.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about return on environment. And basically, West Vincent Township is in a rural oasis with rural values and time-honored traditions, but you're facing the winds of change. Things are starting to move. The purpose of this report is to try and explain for this township what are the natural areas actually worth. We call these return on environment. So the idea here is that return on environment provides information to maximize the benefits that nature provides and to minimize investments that the townships have to make. So why do we do these kinds of studies? Well, we take the science that we're talking about in nature and we make it into understandable terms. Whoops. We talk about the significance that nature provides financially, but also about the connection that's made between nature and our quality of life, our health, our cost of living, our economy, and our sense of place. It can also be put to use immediately. Townships and counties have done that already to make better decisions, and we can use it to measure change over time. So we can talk about, has your return on environment changed over time and how has that affected the economy? And then it can also expose business opportunities. So the 2 major challenges that West Vincent Township experiences from a natural resource standpoint is how to balance growth with communities' existing quality of life, health, cost of living, and sense of place. But also, and maybe more important, is how do we balance the natural system services so that we can maintain this more sustainable economy. So nature's been one of West Vincent Township's cultural legacies for over 300 years. It's provided a sense of place, legacy, and the pride for this particular area. But there are many different problems that have occurred. For example, water pollution, flooding, sprawl, and what have you. What we found from surveys that we've done in different counties and townships are that if we can do a return on environment study or put a dollar value on nature, people feel that it is possible to improve on these legacy environmental problems by 70 to 100%. So sprawl is one of these issues, and in Pennsylvania what we've learned, in actually back about 2010, is that Pennsylvania, more than any other state in the country, spreads out and sprawls more than any other state in the United States. And what that does is it fragments our forests, it destroys some of the wetlands, and it creates natural system problems. But also, on top of that, studies have been done of lots of different townships around the country, but also in Pennsylvania. And they've shown that single-family development does not pay for itself. Actually, for every single-family home that's developed, it typically costs more in cost of service that the township has to pay. And so there's a real need for what we call full cost accounting, that we look at the revenue that the development brings in, you look at the cost of services, just like you would in any business decision, but you also look at the loss of return on environment. So nature's an invisible economy. The first rule of ecology is that everything's connected to everything else. But because Mother Nature doesn't write receipts, nature's often overlooked and undervalued in our policy decisions, our business decisions, and our personal choices. So today, in West Vincent Township, the return on environment values are broken down into different categories. What we found is for our natural system services, which is things like stormwater management, water supply, nutrient absorption, which is part of the same kind of thing that wastewater treatments deal with, pollination and those types of things, is probably worth about $16.3 million a year to the township in avoided costs, meaning you don't have to pay to replace these services at your expense. The riparian areas provide about $3.9 million a year in avoided costs. Outdoor recreation, well, the open space that you have here in the township is worth somewhere between $2 and $8 million a year, and that generates revenue. Now, this number is not a township-specific number, it's actually a more regional number, but it relates to the number of people in the township that participate in outdoor recreation in this area. And then finally, because people have access to open space, they can get outside and have more recreation, and by doing that, they can reduce their health care costs. If you exercise more than once a week, it usually reduces your health care costs by about $714. If you can exercise more than twice a week, it's usually down about $1,400. And so that's the kind of impact it has. And overall, if you sort of just make a ballpark idea, it's probably worth over $20 million a year to the township that the township doesn't have to deal with. So it's difficult to have a strong economy without a healthy environment, clean water, plenty of open space, and quality habitat. Now let's break it down a little bit. The upland areas in the township, this includes things like the upland habitat, pollination, carbon sequestration, air pollution removal, and the biology of the area where plants control one another as well as birds. It's worth about $8 million a year. But the aquatic resources, which look at stormwater management, it looks at water supply, nutrient absorption, the aquatic resources, and erosion control, is worth, again, a little bit more than $8 million a year. So how do we calculate these numbers? Well, just basically there's avoided costs, there's revenues, and then there's premiums from real estate. Now, the avoided costs are natural system services and healthcare costs. The revenues are generated by outdoor recreation, and then there's property values. We haven't done a comprehensive property value analysis for the township, so we're using some of the county information as well as information we've done in other studies in other places. And so each of those requires a little different approach. So sometimes we have to look at dollar values that are in similar places, like other parts of Pennsylvania or even Virginia or New Jersey. Sometimes we have to actually use numbers that have been developed by the Center for Disease Control in some of their studies. Outdoor recreation, we do a fairly detailed analysis, which I'll show you, and then we look at property values. Now, understanding that by looking at avoided cost, what that really means is that nature is providing these services free of charge. But it also allows you to then to recirculate that money in the local economy. And by doing that, it creates better opportunities for all different types of jobs. So we're also able to look at different, what they call land cover types or land uses in the township, and we broke them down into 15 different types. And the ones that have the highest value are the ones that are in the more wetter areas, such as headwater wetlands, riparian forest, and so on. And then we're able to map them. And so what this map tries to illustrate clearly is that the darkest areas are where you get the highest bang for your buck. So those dark areas, the darkest areas, provide almost $7,000 a year in cumulative benefit to the township, all the way down to the white areas, which provide very little to none. So you can see that the riparian corridors and any wetlands and those kinds of places in the area have the highest value, followed by the forests. And the larger the forest, the bigger the bang for the buck, so to speak. Now in the township, there are a number of places that are what are considered to be exceptional value streams. They're very high quality. Then there's also a group of streams which are called high quality streams. And these relate to the water quality standards that have been developed by the Department of Environmental Protection. And so these are designated based upon them being above the general standards. But there are red dashes on here also, and those are areas that are considered to be impaired. And that means that they're below the standards that are developed by the Department of Environmental Protection. Now, the other thing this map shows is these little areas like here and here, and those are the headwaters of every stream. And you have quite a few headwaters because you're at the upper part of the watershed. And so those are the areas that provide the highest value for both bird populations, animals, and also natural system services like water supply and water quality. How am I doing?
Good.
All right? Not going too fast?
Nope.
Okay. So this tries to show you the riparian areas, and the darker the blue, like these, those are those headwater areas, and they provide the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak. But overall, all the riparian areas that currently exist in the township are worth about $3.9 million in avoided cost every year. If we could restore all of those riparian areas, it probably would almost double that kind of a number. These are the forests of the township, and they're very fragmented, but you have some large ones, and that one in the sort of darker shade of green means that it's over 500 acres. And a 500-acre forest in nature is really critical because it has to have that critical mass to be able to support breeding populations of songbirds that migrate, particularly like wood thrush or scarlet tanager. There's a whole list of different types of birds, songbirds and warblers, that require that size of habitat. If you get to 750 acres, which you don't have in the township, you then provide habitat for raptors, like hawks and those types of things. And so the raptors that you see in the township are actually coming from areas outside the township, for the most part, that are providing them food and nesting opportunities. So that 500-acre green area up there is very important from an overall wildlife standpoint. Now, outdoor recreation, we look at recreation activities that do not destroy the environment, but actually use the environment as a place to have fun and enjoy and increase your quality of life. And these things are walking, hunting, fishing, wildlife watching, kayaking, camping, and so on. And we do two scenarios. One looks at what what people spend and how often they participate based on different surveys that have been done, and we take the lowest number. So we know when we have that number, that's the lowest amount of money spent on outdoor recreation in the township. It can't get much lower than that. And then we talk to people in the region that run different types of sporting goods stores and kayaking companies and what have you, and we find out what their estimate is. So the expected value tries to show what these people think it's probably is. So the number's somewhere in between, but it's a big number. So increasing trends in outdoor recreation are already happening. 31% of Pennsylvanians surveyed say that they want to spend more time outside. About half the baby boomers are more interested now in spending more time outside compared to about 25% of the people that are in the generation ahead of the boomers. And then by 2025, about 75% of our workforce will be made up of millennials. And the whole millennial thing is having a healthy lifestyle. And so they'll increasingly put demand because they want to spend more time outside and also working, having fun with their friends. So again, I already talked about this. There's a healthcare value, and we think it's about $3.4 million to the people who reside in the township. From a standpoint of property value, if you live near or on a waterfront, the average value is about 22% higher. If you live in a more urbanized kind of a place, then it's within a quarter of a mile of a park or those types of areas, it's worth about 15% more. If it's more suburbanized kind of development, it's worth about 9% more. But if you're in the rural area, it actually doesn't have a big differential in real estate value because there's a lot of it and people can have access to it. So many of the things that the nature provides are also competitive advantages because it provides the opportunity not just for health and people to spend time outside, but it impacts our water quality, our air quality, and so on. And that's important to a lot of different businesses. So pure, naturally filtered water is critical to different types of companies like bottling companies, pharmaceuticals, and even high-tech companies. Many businesses today want employees to have healthy lifestyles because it reduces their cost. And so it makes this kind of an area important because of the opportunities that are provided here. The two fastest sectors in the economy that are growing are retirees and knowledge-based industries, and they're footloose. They can locate almost anywhere. And so places like West Vincent Township are good candidates for them. And the quality of the environment impacts business location, it attracts investment, it stimulates tourism and recreation activities, and it also attracts wealth, as you well know. So now, the whole notion of the biology that's in West Vincent Township we call it biological diversity. And it's all the native plants that have been here for the last 14,000 years. But it also then is all the animals because they all depend on each other. So in another way, though, these are the different flyways that occur in North and South America. And here's Pennsylvania. And as birds fly north, they hit this area and disperse. And fly south, they disperse down in South America. So this area in Pennsylvania is important to the ecology of both North and South America. These are the protected lands in the township shown in the different stripes. So you've obviously done a very nice job of protecting a lot of the important areas, but a lot of the riparian areas still are not protected. And the large forest that's important for breeding populations of birds has some protected and some that still needs to be thought about. What we're really trying to do here is not just protect the critical areas, but also through backyard design and those people that live along these types of areas. If you live next to a preserve, if you live along a trail, and so on, we want you to plant native plants and canopy. We call these green ribbon landscapes. These are the areas shown in sort of yellow and green on this map. It's really a voluntary idea that within 300 feet of any of these different types of resources that you are able to plant tree canopy, about 60% canopy, 60% native plants, good structure, meaning different levels of habitat, and reduce the amount of impervious surface. That's important because the streams and groundwater are the big benefit. Because as rain comes into these areas, it impacts the groundwater, and about 56% of the rain, we get about 44 inches a year, is evapotranspired back in the atmosphere. 22% goes to groundwater, and 22% feeds the quality of the streams and stream flow. A number of bird species that are existing in the township, there are a number of bird species, and there are also some very important species that they call of special concern. This is part of the Wildlife Action Plans developed by the Game Commission and the Fish and Boat Commission in the state. And this information shows you what their habitats are and what are the things you can do for these different species to protect them. So we can't afford not to protect townships' open space. Simply stated, the loss of open space is more than we can know. And this is what we call our vulnerability map. And what it tries to show is that the areas in the orange have very high values but are not currently protected. The areas in blue are, the areas in light orange are high value and protected, and so on. So it gives you, at a glance, the opportunity to see if you want to have a sustainable ecology and a sustainable environment and a sustainable economy, you want to start to work on preserving those areas or getting conservation easements in some way, because that will help the overall ecology and the economy of the township. So people have put this to work in many different ways. Comprehensive plans, prioritization of natural areas, green infrastructure, riparian buffer ordinances, greenway plans, zoning, site plan review, and so on. It's just that easy, right? Okay, so then we have one other thing I'd like to show you just real quick. We've created a set of interactive maps that are part of the township, done for the township, and I'll let Jeannie talk about those.
Okay, so this will be very quick. We just want to let you know that we created the interactive map for the township so that you have access to the maps that John just showed you tonight. All I want to say is that, just walk you through this real quick. On the first page of the handout that I just gave, I don't know if you want to pass them out. At the top of this interactive map, of course, is the web address for the map. Find your cursor, John. There it is. Okay, there it is. All right. Then in the left, of course, is the zoom in, zoom out button, the home button, the where you're located button. We also have the legend that shows what John just described, the areas that are highest value and vulnerable, the highest value protected, etc. So that is there for your legend. We also have the layers that are available in the interactive map. So when you get into the system, you can click things on and off. If you want to see the parcels, or do you want to turn the streams on and off, you can play with this depending on what you want to look at. And also you can change the base map. So if you'd rather have, for example, an aerial view, you can take a look at that. And this becomes helpful if you want to see what's high value and what's really on the ground. So you can change your base map too. One that's kind of fun, if you're into maps, is this swipe tool. So if you want to evaluate something that's under a particular parcel, you can use the swipe tool. And finally, I just want to show you that you can set the transparency. So for example, if you go to the green ribbon landscape, you can make it more or less transparent. Maybe I'll pick a different layer to show that. You can see how that changes the transparency, so you can look a little bit, it's easier to look underneath. So those are really the basic functions of the interactive map. We'll give you the link. We have a few final reports to share, and that's what we have for you tonight.
Well, thank you very much.
I would just say that the hope after tonight is that we will continue to work with the EAC and the township through the Schuylkill Highlands cluster on implementing programming in the township and recommendations from the ROE study.
Thank you.
The report does have recommendations, not just.
Right, it does have recommendations.
Next on the agenda is the draft budget presentation.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just take a minute to get myself ready.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, you're doing on this?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So we'll just go to that.
We can get our first country.
Okay, so you just switched me out, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. That was very interesting.
Let's try this.
You know what?
Yeah.
This is what I did.
You muted it.
I
That's
muted it,
cute.
sorry.
Thank you, that's
Yeah.
all right. Okay, let's try it. Okay. All right, well, while we get this working, I did have a handout with a PowerPoint up at the top of the room here. If you'd like to grab one if you haven't already. And let's just see if I can get this. Yeah, It's gotta be so simple. What's going on here?
She and I, right?
Yeah, it's all in. Come on.
You only have one port on your laptop?
I have another one.
Let's try that. Thanks for coming. Hot ones here.
I'll tell you.
Yep.
Might be one, I don't know.
Oh, beautiful. See, just change it. Okay. All right, very good. All right, very good. Good evening, everyone. You know, we're another trip around the year and looking to get a whole new work plan for 2020 together. So I'm pleased to present a draft budget. We're still working through and refining some things, but we're happy to go through this. We're looking at, of course, with the budget and setting goals and try and form everything. This is the specific work plan for the delivery of township programs and services. And we certainly are doing that to implement policy by the Board of Supervisors. So we deliver primary functions of government in accordance with our mission and core value statement, and of course allocate revenue sufficiently to meet our needs for the township. Keep our fund balances in line with our policy, so we have a buffer with our reserves, and meet the conditions of a second-class township code in doing that. I know I provide, for the last 3 years, the overview of just how the municipal millage, we are looking at no tax increase for 2020, keeping the millage at 2.09 mils. Just for reference, the county and school millage is here, and then it goes into calculating what your real estate tax bill represents. The assessed valuation for the township, thankfully, has been going up and is projected to go up again we're looking at real estate 3 to 4% overall. We'll get that announcement on the assessed valuation for 2019 later this month. In looking at budget development, of course, we meet with department heads and staff, the board, our committees. We reach out, see what everybody is interested in doing for the following year, and we're reviewing that information to see what we can get done. We do have to advertise the budget for a period of 20 days prior to adoption for the end of the year. This just goes through essentially the taxes and the different levy for each for real estate, transfer tax, earned income tax for the township, and our dedicated earned income tax for the open space fund. I do have this presentation all posted on the township website. The actual draft budget is posted as well for comment. As far as revenue and projections looking forward, we have taken into account the fact that some of the subdivisions for building activity are coming to a close, but we have Weatherstone and also lots for Bryn Co-ed that are going to be coming online, and some other residential development that we are factoring in. So as compared to 16, 18 figures, we see the residential building activity kind of tapering down, but still being quite active in the township. Our transfer taxes, we anticipate with the sale of the homes that are now completed to remain in similar figures as 2019. Income tax, or I'm sorry, earned income tax, and reviewing that, we're looking at our projections to return to the actual budget level for 2019, for 2020. And we're not looking to borrow any money by 2019, that's 2020. As far as culture and recreation, our playground fees, that's going to be unchanged. The community garden, now that we are just about done with the water hookup, will change slightly, but overall will remain steady. Our liquid fuels allocation is projected to remain at similar levels. Our cable franchise fees, police grants, fireman's relief, pension aid are projected to remain at similar levels. We did see a slight increase this year, but there's different factors that play into that. The sewer fund is only includes the Courts of Chester Springs sewer plant. We have been working very diligently to get help Bucks County, who has been operating the Corsa Chester Springs sewer plant, and have that dedication take place this year. Unfortunately, DEP needs to sign off on the facility, the different fields that, take the disposal, that sort of thing. So we're carrying that forward to 2020. All right, as far as expenses, we do have contracts pending, so we have to take that into account in terms of our police union, our AFSCME union. The contract with AFSCME ends 12/31/2019. We're in arbitration with police. So we factor that in, and the township health insurance renewal is an 8% increase this year. So we had to factor that in overall for the township budget. Of course, for general government, we've got our accounting expenses, payroll, let's see here, auditing, communication supplies, that sort of thing, and data technology includes a scanning project, server maintenance that we're going to be doing. We have our new servers coming online, and that sort of thing. Engineering services, we are including the inspection services needed for the Brinco demolition project. Fellowship Trail, hopefully we can make progress on that, and some other planning services. We have legal expenses, and hopefully we can do a little more planning next year once our codification is done. We have our insurance coverage, and also all of our committees, which are in the community development and culture and recreation. We're carrying forward the capital costs for the extension of Fellowship Trail Phase 2, and we're also including some amenities for the Brinco Park. So I know that's ambitious given the demolition, but we had a lot of success and progress this year, so we'll see. Public safety, fire, EMS. We have, in our code enforcement department, we have included our costs for our zoning, our building inspection services, emergency management, really unchanged, thankfully. But if we have anything else other than updates and planning, things we have to keep up with, that's what handles that. We have an EOC situation. The fire budget includes our operating contribution, the fire aid that gets distributed, and the workers' compensation, which we also pay for. And then, of course, planning and zoning. Police department, certainly personnel is included here, equipment, software licensing, and we have a vehicle here in the budget to keep up with the fleet status. Oh, I also didn't want to fail to mention, we also are looking to replace our inspector truck. It's just costing a lot more in maintenance than what it should at this point. We have our animal control officer and training and development for staff. Public Works Department is also our personnel, supplies, equipment. Here we have our, supplies and contractor services for winter maintenance. That is included here, the chip seal of township roads, and we use our liquid fuels allocation to support the paving and the maintenance program there. The open space fund, we have our special revenue fund, and we have, of course, our maintenance fund dedicated for the Brinco demolition. Other funding coming in that if there's potential for different proposals that may come forward from the Open Space Review Board to the Board of Supervisors, that would be reviewed. And then we have our sewer fund, which I had mentioned. We'll keep that hanging out here for a little bit and do our best to get that dedicated over properly. Capital fund, one change, since we had one capital fund and doing the chart of accounts and the improvements we're splitting that out between the capital road reserve and the capital fund reserve. And the road reserve is going to take care of the bulk of money associated with things that we did have planned, Janie Lane, Buttonwood Lane Bridge. We're getting closer, but all that engineering and due diligence survey is all intended for that capital outlay. We have Schoolhouse Lane Phase 2 and other paving projects, potentially Kimberton Road. We'll have to look at some things and see what we can do, but we have that programmed. And in the capital fund reserve, we do have some things we need to upgrade as far as the building and facility needs. The roof, both at this building and the barn here, which we'll address next year, as well as just looking at the facility as a whole. So here's our township mission, and this is what we want to do every day. Here's the proposed 2020 budget. On the left side is the adopted 2019. On proposed 2020, you'll see the variance there. You can tell really we're carrying forward and don't have as much variance in many of the departments. We're trying to, as much as we have some increases, looking at things where we can get a little more competitive with contracts and do what we can to deliver the same level or more of services. We're looking at a net income on the general fund of $64,743. Liquid fuels, similar. Open space, similar as well, so we're carrying forward Bryn Coed. The demolition project, sewer, same. The revenue on an expense on the capital road and then the capital reserve. But I want to make note here, the general fund, there's a net income proposed. On the liquid fuels, open space, and sewer, we're looking at balanced budgets, and then the capital road with the interest, looking at a net income. All right, any questions? Done.
What's capital reserve? NA this year, 115,000?
So that's taking the existing capital budget and breaking it out so it's specific to road and then specific to capital improvements of the township generally. So we're going to actually have two funds.
I thought you did that before, didn't you?
We adopted
It didn't
one.
exist last year, right? They
Yeah.
weren't split. so-
They weren't split. Yeah,
But you tracked them as two.
that's what we're implementing now.
Yeah. Prior to this, it was wrapped up in general funds, which is what gave us our loss. So then we had, then we created in 2019 capital fund, but it was kind of combined. We had
It's in
nowhere-
one line, and then it's capital roads, capital projects fund.
Yeah, but
$1
we
million,
counted the
6 and 4 million or
funds, the
something.
actual funds in under that budget, that funds. Now it's just gonna be split.
Completely separate.
Completely
Before,
separate.
we had capital funds, but we had two sub-accounts, but they're all in the same
Correct.
account. Now they're
Yeah.
actually going to be separate.
Okay,
That's
so
all I know.
where does the 115 come in on that?
That would be facility needs. The roof that I mentioned here, the roof at the barn, potentially planning to look at this complex.
And the other capital fund is just roads.
Designated road.
Yeah, I see that, and then there's a net difference, 100,000, 70,000.
Right.
It just, okay. I don't really grasp it. Is there any new staff hire included here?
No.
No police, road crew?
Police right now, we are not actually at full capacity with our part-timers. So we still would welcome resumes for a part-timer. We only have 2 right now, we usually have 3. So no change there. And then no change to staffing. Another proposed at this time.
You have a vacancy on the road crew.
We do have our vacancy on the road crew as well.
Brian?
You actually got ahead of one of my questions but it also makes me wonder a bit. You mentioned about the barn roof, and I know I asked about it some time back. You said you were looking at estimates for it. How bad are the estimates?
Above $30,000 to $40,000.
Is that just
For the barn
painting
roof.
it, or are they having to replace some of the
Replace it.
paneling inside?
Yeah, replace paneling.
Okay. We're getting 2 servers, and the thought occurred to me, I'm not hoping not to jinx you. You've got 2 servers running up, one of them catches fire. Does the other one have enough excess capacity that it could go and run both processes? Or would we scramble like crazy to get a new server?
We will have double the capacity that we have now.
Okay.
So we do have that. We're also going to be conducting a backup recovery test. very
Yes!
soon With the new servers, so that we can go through that very exercise.
Good.
Okay.
And the last thing is, and it's kind of interesting demonstration tonight, I've noticed a lot of places these days have the ceiling mounted video display unit.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, waiting around is beneficial, because I think a lot of them now use a Wi-Fi connection as opposed to a wired connection, which makes it so. Have we thought about potentially mounting one in the ceiling?
I've given the room some thought on what's best, because I think sometimes it's helpful to show, when we are presenting, maybe something a little bit more, advanced. We're kind of at that point where it's not as expensive actually to get some of that multimedia. So I think it's something to explore.
Okay, and I think it's also a chicken and egg.
Yeah.
I don't have it, so I won't assume to go and use it. But then if I do have it, then more people will use it because,
Good.
we can do a display on it. So I'm throwing an outline idea there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Erica?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, moving on, we have a request for subdivision extension for Amanda Maxwell.
Yes.
I make the motion to approve the subdivision extension request for Amanda Maxwell at 1830 St. Matthews Road through July 17th of 2020.
Go on.
Oh, I thought that, okay.
Suzanne Keller?
I could just,
Hold it down. There you go.
there we go, thank you.
2020, okay. Yeah, fine.
Did you finish?
Yeah.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next is a resolution of approval for a two-lot subdivision at 1414 Birch Run Road.
I make the motion to approve the resolution number 15-2019, approving the minor subdivision application for 1123 Jamie Lane, tax parcel 25-3-101-1B, owned by Roy and Rosalind Neff.
Okay, hold on a second.
I know.
That did not work.
Birch Run and Janie Lane.
Hold on. Well, yeah, this is Harry Price, and now he just read a
It's the
motion.
same.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, I'll give you a
Okay,
little
that's fine.
explanation.
I mean, is the motion correct?
It is.
All right, I'll second that.
Any comments or questions?
What's the, what was your confusion? What's Eric, how can Eric
The
explain?
address, so the actual parent parcel has an official address of the Janie Lane, 1123 Janie Lane. So legally, we needed to make sure it was that, even though the entire
Okay.
subdivision was called 1414 Birch Run
Gotcha.
Road.
And the access will continue to be from 1414 Birch
Yes.
Run Road.
Mhm. Chris, if you don't
Yes,
mind?
my name's
Sure.
Chris Daly. I'm with D.O. Howe and Associates. I'm the engineer responsible for preparing the plan. One thing I wanted to clarify is with condition letter B, it states, before the plans are recorded, the applicant must obtain any necessary planning modules, blah, 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 and reviews from all outstanding agencies. It sounds like this condition is cookie cutter, and this goes on all subdivision applications that require improvements, but in this case, it's just a subdivision, so most of this isn't applicable
Right.
to this. I just want to kind of clarify that just for my
That's important.
client Harry.
Mhm.
Make it clear that we don't need to obtain these approvals from these outside agencies for the subdivision.
It is very
until
standard.
the improvements are proposed.
Mhm.
Julie said she was hoping to come tonight, but she got a sick cat or something. So her question was, weren't you going to be putting all of the notes on the plan and resubmitting it before this?
Before recording the plan. We have to satisfy, that's one of the conditions that we have to satisfy Arrow and Cedarville's.
And have you done that? Or that's just a condition that the supervisors are imposing on you tonight?
Exactly, it's a condition that's being imposed.
How long do you think that?
Okay.
To address all the comments, we're hoping to have it done within the next couple weeks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is this
Any
ever
other
called a
questions?
three-lot subdivision? It's gonna be 3 lots, right?
We're subdividing one lot into 2, but we're gonna be utilizing a driveway that goes through another lot, so it's a 2-lot subdivision.
So it was already 2 lots, the 20 acre and the 40, is that?
Okay,
Yes, it's a 40-acre parcel that's being subdivided.
that's the one,
into two.
so it's 2 lots.
It's 2 lots.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next we have a payment recommendation for Berg Construction.
I make a motion to approve the payment recommendation number 2 in the amount of $359,446.68 to Berg Construction in accordance with Arrow Consulting's October 31, 2019 recommendation letter.
Second.
Any comments, questions? Brian?
What road did they do what on?
This is the second payment. We had a payment number 1 last month. And this is South Beaver Hill Road, Art School, Kimberton, Deweese.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, now we're into public comment. Any public comments?
I can get my feet untangled. There was what might have been a rumor going around this afternoon that the township email lists were hacked. Is there any, I'm getting a lot of,
No, I have no official email, phone call, anything with that presented to me.
Okay,
They were just
if
like
they-
a rumor of some kind, and we don't have anything to validate or
Okay.
not validate it.
I
So,
just
yeah.
checking.
Yes.
Hey, I'm Ted Mulligan, Senior Advisor to the Sarah Schick for Supervisor campaign. Tomorrow, before noon, I will be posting on my personal Facebook page a critique of the ethics of the Dolcinos for Supervisor campaign. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
I have one
Okay, that's right.
One thing I'd like to bring up here, last meeting, we gave tacit approval to the use of the township building for called a political meeting. And unbeknownst to any of us up here, we didn't know that township rules forbid the use of the township building for anything political. Now, with that said, let me say that political being election or anything thereof or promoting a certain party. But if someone from, let's say, the county were to come here and talk about a county project, it's not political. Like we've had different members from the county talk about different programs and such like that. So with that said, there will be no further use of the township building for political means.
Yes, but we have to write that, I think.
We have to write that? It's
It's
in
all
the
right.
township rules.
Yeah, but is it defined enough to make sure that we don't screw it up?
It says apply 2 weeks ahead of time. You have time to look at it to see if you're going to screw up.
We could define political activity.
Yeah, I think we have to, and it should be, it should cover every township property, not just the meeting room.
No, it right now covers the building.
I know, but it's kind of laxed in, like, Bernie was saying that somebody from the county could come in here and talk about something that could be considered political, and we have to have a way of deciding if it is or isn't. So how do we do that? Is it just candidates? Because the meeting that was here was not, it was in a response to something, but it wasn't a political campaign type thing.
Well, it was sponsored, I think Barry said, by the Republican
Republican Committee,
Well,
yeah.
that sounds pretty.
It is, and I agree 100%. Well, okay, I mean, but in any way, we're going to adhere to whatever was written before, and if we can improve the interpretation, it would be easier for management.
Yeah, the interpretation needs to be objective.
Yep.
And we're gonna word it in a way
I
that
know.
it's very clear, and I think that,
I think what you just said, it wasn't a matter of interpretation, it was a matter of awareness. You didn't know that's what the policy was.
And, well, it's been done before, forever, so we just, you know, didn't think twice about it. Yes, Harry?
I'm sure you all notice that we're going to be voting here tomorrow, and I encourage you all to go out and vote, whether you vote here or elsewhere in the area. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do, is to vote for the people you want.
One last thing, we're going to have parking over in front of the police department for campaign workers, poll workers and such like that, so just to announce again, thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
I read somewhere that we were supposed to park either up on Mailhorn Road at the,
Using the parking. To not
Let
block.
me just say something on that. So there's probably only going to be about 10 or 12 people here working. There will be about 10 or 12 spots in front of the police department.
so that's a lot more convenient.
Yes.
Yes, it will be. So
Okay.
there is overflow up there if need be, but I really don't think we're going to need it.
Okay, just making sure.
Maria, you want to come up here? You were
Yeah,
next.
you stole exactly what I was gonna ask, and I would just ask the candidates to please, ask the people that are working, it's usually not the poll workers that are taking all the spaces up, it's the people out on the sidewalk that stop people from even walking in to vote, so if we could please have some courtesy to our voters and it would really help the democratic process, and please ask those folks not to park in this lot, because let's leave it open for people to cast their votes.
Yep. Thank you.
The Democrats have already put out a message to all of their people in
Great.
that regard, so.
Good, because the Republicans voted for it.
And at one point, the police department decided that it would be nice if we didn't park in that part of the lot, but they decided because if they had an emergency and had to get out quickly, they didn't want my car parked gilly-squat all around. They've got a couple cars pre-positioned, so they're ready to go if they need to. And so we can do some parking here, some parking back here. And
No, we're leaving this one open for voters.
Yeah.
So the park will be there or at the park,
up Mailhorn Road, or
Right,
at the floor.
or all the way down, that's a long walk, but, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have my car down here, and anyone who wants to go up and get their car, they can take a friend and go up in my car if it's too far or too dark or too rainy
Is it
or
your sports
something.
car?
What?
Is it your sports car?
No.
Oh, well, you bring that and I'll drive all day.
Well, I
You could park it down and
I'll
down.
think of it, a quid pro quo, I'll think about it.
Okay, any other comments? No?
I move to adjourn.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is this for us, is this the one I signed, or everybody signed? The minutes? Good one.
Oh, no. This is the minutes from last week.
Oh, yeah, October. Oh, shit. Do we have pens?
I can listen, I can get in there.
That's a long window, I'm telling you, he's getting started.
We need to go in.
I'll rough it. I know who we're playing with. No.
You already know.
It's good here, West.
It's the season.
So it's a loss for us. Yes. But John Walker's.
Quick till after the election, anyway, at this rate, so.
Yeah, he's tall, young.
I might recognize him.
Yeah. They've